Hello and welcome to James Bond Radio on this wonderful Tuesday morning. This is day 17 of the 30 days of SPECTRE, and today we are going to be talking about thwarting Blofeld's plan. That's basically everything, well not everything, but the immediate aftermath of after he escaped from the crater base and heads back to London. My name's Tom Sears and I'm joined by my esteemed buddy Chris Wright. Say hello, Chris.
Hello, Chris.
How are you feeling today? Are you excited to talk Spectre on this wonderful Tuesday?
I am indeed. I think we, when we talked about the last sort of in our last podcast, the escape from Blofeld's lair, we both agreed there were certain bits we weren't sure about. So it would be nice to look at this sort of area now and see if it stays the same, whether it gets better, or just to. There's quite a lot to talk about, so it's good.
Absolutely.
Good stuff.
Absolutely indeed. So, before we get started, make sure you come and join us on the old social medias. Come to facebook.com and stick James Bond Radio into the search. You'll find us on there. Much conversation to be had on there. Come and join us on Twitter, which is at James Bond Radio. Also, come and join us and subscribe on YouTube. Again, just put James Bond Radio into the search and you'll find us. And come to jamesbondradio.com, where you can find some wonderful blog posts, and all our episodes are posted up there as well, and a bunch of stuff. And if you're one of the elite few who bought a James Bond Radio t-shirt, make sure you visit the James Bond Radio Listener Hall of Fame and add yourself to that, because you're part of the elite 00 section that are the JBR t-shirt owners. So come and do that if you haven't already. And last but not least, if you wouldn't mind coming to our iTunes page, again, just put James Bond Radio into the iTunes store search box, and you'll find us. And if you wouldn't mind leaving us a lovely glowing 5-star review, that really helps us to rank higher in the searches and attract more listeners, doesn't it, Chris?
It certainly does. And I've learnt my lesson, and it definitely does.
Very good. So where should we begin today, Chris?
Well, I think we should begin. Okay, so I think one of the first scenes we see afterwards is we see M arriving at the safe house with Tanner and Q.
Yes.
And I don't think Moneypenny is here, because I know she joins him in the car, but I don't remember seeing her actually at the safe house. Do you remember that or not? I don't think she's there.
That's a good point. It's tricky when you don't have the film on DVD or something to check these details, but I think you're right. I don't think she is there immediately, no.
But there's lots of stuff to chat about with this particular scene. First of all, I love the fact that Q, safe house, hadn't heard of the safe house. It's just across away from Trafalgar Square. Anyone's office could be underneath it, whatever. Anyone, I'd love to go to Trafalgar Square, find that location, climb up the stairs, in through the window, just to see see what's there. But the best thing about it is obviously the name, and how class is that?
Yeah,
so good.
Absolutely. Hildebrand Prints and Rarities. That definitely brought a smile to my face when I saw that on the glass. Definitely.
It was good, very good. So this is basically, they don't know where Bond is at the moment. They've got to go to a safe house because they're hoping that's the only place that basically C hasn't got eyes and ears on. They're not sure if it's safe. Obviously, they open the door. Luckily, Bond's inside. Bond does a lot of that, doesn't he? He likes to hide in places.
He does,
and then people rock up and then find it. He's done it twice with them, pretty much. And he's done it. Well, he's done it quite a few times, I think, hasn't he? Obviously, he's done it here. Well, 3 times if you include this one with him.
Yeah, I like it. I like the way when M opens the door and he goes, "It's safe," because Bond's in there, and that was cool. It's nice. I really like this little sequence. Obviously, Bond steps forward and he says, this is where obviously he tells M that Den B is a Spectre mole kind of thing. And he says the recently deceased head of Spectre, Ernst Stavro Blofeld. Little does he know at this point that he's not recently deceased at all. So there's that going on, and then obviously this is where they stock up on arms and stuff. They get ready for the mission, and this is one thing I like in films, is when there's a mission coming and they get ready for it. There's something appealing about that. Do you know what I mean? They get all their gear on, they get the overalls on or whatever, or if it was Pierce, he'd have got his overalls on, and then they get their weapons ready and all their bits and bobs, and then they head off. But I suppose this is a pivotal moment, because obviously as they're on the way, and we do need to track down that location, that's a future location video for us, isn't it, next time we're in London?
Definitely. Yeah.
When they're on the way, Madeline says, "No, I'm not having any of it. I've lived this life. I can't do it again. I'm off," kind of thing. I know you can't change, James. And then she buggers off. So how do you feel about that little bit there?
Well, I love the fact that M's getting kitted out as well. It's not just like, here's the guns, 007, go on, you get ready. He's a part of it, isn't he?
Yeah.
He's strapping them on, he's getting ready for it. Tanner's sort of watching them a bit, sort of, but the funny thing, well, not the funny thing, but the interesting thing is, obviously, Swan is watching them and taking it all in. And you can tell that as she's watching that happen, she's having flashbacks of her dad, maybe seeing her dad get a gun out or whatever. And I'm pretty sure that's what's going through her mind. Obviously, she's just recently met this man. They've had a really intense sort of thing has happened. She's got to that point where she thinks, bloody, this guy could be the one, so to speak, perhaps. And then as soon as she sees that, the doubts come in. Up until that point, I think, obviously when they escaped, everything was fine and dandy. And this is the thing that swung it against her sort of, interest in Bond, I think, or at least plausibility of them staying together. So they go outside and she says that. And I think it's not, I mean, it would, okay, if she'd stayed with them, that would have been a completely different side of things. There is that whole thing about her being a bit of a damsel in distress, so she leaves, and obviously she's later kidnapped. Now, do you think it would have worked if she had joined them within the sort of battle and stuff like that? Obviously, the storyline with Bond getting kidnapped is a bit different, but
I don't know about that. To be honest, I think. I don't think she is a damsel. Like, obviously, he has to rescue her at the very end.
Yeah.
But at the same time, she's not a shrinking violet. There's that scene in the back of the car with the syringe. She takes control of that situation as much as she can. There's the bit on the train. Obviously, she saves Bond from death with Mr. Hinks and shoots him in the arm and all that kind of stuff. So, naturally, obviously, Hinks is going to turn around and smack her in the face and she's out cold for a bit. But, if Mr. Hinks hit anyone apart from Bond in the face, they would be out cold for a while, wouldn't they? You know what I mean? Yeah. So I don't see her as a damsel at all. Obviously, there's the bit at the end, which is a little bit different. But in terms of her overall character, I don't think that's what she is. But I couldn't see her getting, kitted out. Get the old combat boots on and stuff. It would have fallen a bit dodgy. I think she needed to have that moment, or at least just wait at Hildebrand. That would have been the better thing to do, I suppose. Yeah.
Well, she obviously, that whole thing about her hating guns, that obviously strengthens what happened in the film.
Yeah.
And I think it was, and it took a lot of balls for her to say that to Bond. Obviously, she cared for him, but it wasn't meant to be, or at least initially then she thought that. So that's not a shrinking violet admitting that to oneself, is it?
No, absolutely.
When she's with someone that she likes. So she sort of goes away, and then obviously Bond and M get in the Jag, and they go away, and obviously Tanner and Q. And at that point, I think Moneypenny joins them and goes away. Now, we mentioned this before, but when she's walking away, Swan, we think there's a noise, don't we? And when you watched it recently, did you listen out for that? Was there definitely some sort of footsteps or something like that?
That's my take on it. She's walking down the street on her own. She hears a movement behind her and she stops and looks back. To me, that is all we need. That's like we said about, where does Bond get the plane from? He should have just given that look to the plane, and that was all we'd have needed to see to silence the people who complain about that. And I feel like this was that nod for, okay, she's obviously getting kidnapped. Do you know what I mean? That's obviously where that's going to lead. So yeah, that's definitely what I take from it for sure.
Cool. And what did you think about the next sort of scene with the cars, with the two cars going through?
I really like this. I tell you why, because I thought, I'm like, right, I'm settling in now. I know what's going to happen. They're on their way to the CNS building. There's going to be an assault on the CNS building, bit of a shootout, bit of fisticuffs maybe, and then we're going to head on to the end of the film. I wasn't expecting the whole, ram raid thing on the side of the car. That was a bit of a left turn, I thought, which was really nice. And like I said, I thought Mr. Hinks had come back. That was his comeback moment. Obviously, that wasn't him. It was just like a random heavy. But what I do like about this, there's something like I always say about when you see the old MI6 crew back in the day with Rogers movies or something. You see Freddie Gray and Robert Brown and all those kind of people. It's like old friends, family. I totally feel the same about the new crop with Naomi Harris and Tanner and Q and all those lots. I think they're brilliant, and I think they work so well together. And that sort of scene where they're all going together in the two cars, I think is brilliant, and I love it. And I know one bit that you're particularly happy with is the fact that obviously when the car rams them, they're both out cold. Bond and M both out cold. And then when the heavies get distracted by the car following up the rear with Tanner, Q, and Moneypenny in it, M takes the chance to kind of slip away. And I love, do you know what? I've always been curious about Bernard Lee's M, about his days in the Navy and stuff like that. I want to learn about Miles Messervy's like past, you know?
Yeah.
And what I like about Gareth Mallory is that you sort of do see hints of his old SAS kind of past, kind of very subtly. I don't want to see M abseiling down the side of a building or something ridiculous like that. What I want to see is just a little hint of like, this is a man who's well-hard and he can handle himself and all that kind of stuff. And I feel like that little bit of sneakiness he does is a perfect example of that.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And I think we're going to see, you don't want to see, obviously we saw a bit in Skyfall with the, the inquiry scene. Obviously we've got quite a bit in this film. I don't want to see every single film him doing something like that.
Yeah.
But it is brilliant when you see it. So I don't know, would it be bad if we saw him sort of do something? I mean, I think the stories would have to change. So, you'd have to have your classic scene, which we got at the start.
Yeah.
Then, maybe meeting him in the field or something like that, but not necessarily as involved.
Well, perhaps. Bernard used to like coming out and visiting Bond on location time to time, didn't he? So there's definitely that potential. I think what I like is like you've got an M now who can handle himself, and you do see a little bit of that. And it's the same thing. Like I said, I didn't like seeing Moneypenny running around with a gun and all that kind of stuff in Skyfall. And there is that danger that it becomes like a team movie where Moneypenny's running around with a gun and, Q's running around in the field, left, right, and centre, and M's doing the same. And it's like, no. They can do a tinier bit of that, but they need to stick in their relative little boxes. Like, for example, I love seeing Q in the field in this one. I don't want that to become a regular thing. I want some classic Q Lab scenes out of the next few movies, and him popping up in the field now and then. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. Like, what's one of the lovely things about License to Kill is Desmond has his moment to shine in that, and I adore it. And if he was doing that every time, it wouldn't be as special,
No, that's very true. And Q could always contact him via other means while he's in the field. He doesn't necessarily have to turn up in person, does he?
Absolutely.
He's got sort of different gadgets that he could use to contact Bond. So, that's another way that they could play it.
Yeah.
But I love the way that you mentioned they're a family, because they are like a sort of a family unit now. And like we've seen Bond with Moneypenny, with M sort of in the field a fair bit. Obviously with Judi Dench's M, she was out a bit as well. We haven't really seen, we've seen like M and Moneypenny briefly, in obviously M and Moneypenny, quite a lot, but we've never seen sort of Q with those sort of group before, have we? Q's always been by himself, or with Bond, but he's never really been out with
not much interaction with those characters, really.
Exactly. So do you think that's okay? How that is in this film? Do you think that's good?
I think what we have is like that thing at the beginning where Moneypenny says, why do you think you can trust me? And he says instinct. I think that's a lovely thing, because at the end of the day, this version of Moneypenny and Bond has only just begun. Like, she only turned up in the last film. At the end of the last film, he's like, we haven't been formally introduced, which I didn't like that bit. Of course they'd have been formally introduced. But anyway, I digress. At the end of the last film, they're just getting acquainted in a sense. So it's to me, that's like, this film is like almost like the origin of that Moneypenny flirtation stuff starting to come through in the relationship. And I think seeing those, talking about the trust thing again, it's like you're establishing this core group of people at MI6 who Bond absolutely trusts. And I think that's a good thing. I like that.
Yeah, I can't wait to see them all in the next one. I really can't. So, okay, so moving on. Obviously, there was quite a cool bit where the sort of heavies are shooting, shooting the car as Tanner's reversing, and he, like we said before, he does this sort of J-turn spin, and Q almost gets shot. But he doesn't, and that's quite cool, and they get away. And then we cut to Bond being taken out. We don't know where he is. He's got the bag over his head. His wrists have got like a cable tie, or whatever it is, on them. And he still manages. He knows one of the guys got a gun. As soon as he knows where it is, it's like, grab that, shoot the other, shoot him, and then sort of almost like, whoa, like Hulk. He just sort of snaps out of his restraints.
Nice. I like that.
Takes the bag off, and then bloody hell, I'm in front of old MI6 type thing, which is quite cool. Yeah. So, what did you think? I mean, some people, I know we've heard quite a lot of negative things about, well, not a lot, but from a few people about, we shouldn't have gone back to the old MI6, that they shouldn't have, it shouldn't have been blown up and all that sort of thing.
Yeah.
And obviously it still stands as we know it. So what did you think about that whole take about bringing it back home?
Right. I think that's quite an interesting thing to do, to be honest with you, because at the end of the day, that's been like the seat of MI6's power for, since Brosnan. That was the first time we saw that particular building. And I have no problems with that. In fact, like we kind of said last time, like the whole thing about there being a troublesome third act in this film, right? And I think most people would be in agreement that probably the last third of the film is probably the weakest part of the movie, right? But this section is something I don't have any problems with at all, really. I mean, what we talked about in the crater base and the easy escape and all that kind of stuff, totally get that. This section, and I've got some qualms about the end as well, but this section I think is great. I think a lot of people were saying things like, that net that he jumps down at the end, that was just supposed to be there. But when you watch the film, like, that is shown to us a lot in this sequence. When he first walks into the hallway with his name on the wall, like, you see through that net looking down, he looks up and you see the crater of like what used to be the room where the explosion was, and he's looking through that net. We see that net a lot, so it's there. Like, that's establishing that's there, it's not just come out of nowhere.
It's telling you it's there because there's a reason why it's there.
Yeah, precisely. And then obviously the place is rigged to explode because that's what Tanner says at the beginning when they're on the boat on the Thames. He's like, that it's cheaper to pull the thing down than rebuild, and all that. So he says it's rigged to blow next week or something, doesn't he? At the beginning, whenever it's set to go, I can't remember exactly, but
how long do you think the timeline is between this point within the whole Daniel Craig Bond universe and since the explosion happened in Skyfall? How long ago do you think that is? Because that's quite an interesting question.
Yeah, that's a tough one. I would wager. Oh, actually, maybe there's a clue in there, actually, because, or does he say? Okay, I'm just thinking back to the Moneypenny scene where he tells her about M, and he says, it dropped in my mailbox just after she died. And he says, I've been tracking him ever since, so I think is what he says. So
maybe, is it for like 3 months or something?
I would wager that, I don't think he actually, I thought he might say a time, but I don't think he does. He just says, I've been tracking him ever since. I would wager it will be anywhere between like 3 and 6 months after the explosion, I would have thought.
So in that case, do you think, like, obviously it would have been stripped in terms of files or stuff like that. Do you think we still should have seen things like bits of broken furniture or like pictures on the wall that are half smashed or like, chairs that have been crumpled? So there's still remnants of stuff that was in, so you could recognize that it was sort of offices rather than just a big shell? Or do you think it'd been so much time then everything would have been stripped out? Or what's your opinion on that?
That never struck me as one of those things of being like, I just feel like the setting looks more or less like it should do if it's rigged to blow within a week or whatever the time frame is. But I think that's an interesting climax. We've got Blofeld's crater base, and naturally you would assume that's where the climax would happen, but it doesn't. The climax happens in MI6 itself, the old building. So to me, that's like something we've never had before. That's cool. I enjoy that. Yeah.
I definitely did. Yeah.
So then obviously we've got the when he first enters, you've got James Bond scrawled on the wall with all the names of the fallen kind of heroes from the past, kind of thing. So
have you tried to search for your name on the wall?
Yeah. Do you know what I was thinking? That I was like, man, one day maybe JBR where Barbara will listen to the show, and one day something like that will happen. Where imagine if it said Chris Wright and Tom Sears on the wall just above James Bond being scrawled in. I would have a definite tearful moment if that came true. Yeah.
That would make my day. That would have made my day. Funny enough, though, it's either just above or just below. I think it's just above James Bond. There's a name that starts with Christopher.
Yeah.
And then the name above that starts with Andrew, and that's my middle name. And I was hoping the name above that ended in Wright, but it didn't. And I'm like, I'm scouring the whole wall for like a Wright somewhere, just so I can match up my name. But apparently someone mentioned that they're sort of production crew, so they're names of certain production crew that are on the memorial wall. So all we need to do is just get on Bond 25, and then maybe find another way of doing it. But
Absolutely.
yeah, so it's quite cool. Imagine if you were like location assistant, but you got your name on the wall. And
naturally, that is the sort of thing that somebody would sneak their name into that, wouldn't they? Do you know what I mean? It's like, that seems like a perfect opportunity. And I do, every time I see that scene, I do scan it for any name I recognise, but I haven't seen anybody I recognise yet.
Do you think they would have minded if when they were taking a break through shooting, you and I sort of broke in to the set, or perhaps a real place, I'm assuming it's a set, broke in and then like got a graffiti spray and sprayed over James Bond and then just put JBR and then like ran away again?
To be honest, mate, I don't think they would have minded at all. I think they'd have been absolutely fine with that.
Or just put radio underneath.
Yeah. That's the way to do it, wouldn't it? .com.
That would have been awesome, but
very nice.
Yeah.
So how about you then? How do you feel about MI6 being used as the climactic bit?
Yeah, no, I've got no problem with it whatsoever. I think it's great. I mean, there's a bit where we see, which we'll get to in a little bit, where he walks down the stairs and there's like, it's kind of water underneath, and you're thinking, okay, is that a passage to the Thames, or has that just been waterlogged, or how has that come in? But it looks quite cool. I remember seeing that in one of the trailers when it was super slowed down.
Yeah, me
and we
too.
got a little glimpse, and it was like, where the hell is that? It's some underground sort of cistern or something like that. I thought it might have been a bit of a From Russia with Love type thing, but so no, but I think it's great because he's going back to the base. Like you said, it's not been done before. It's bringing Bond back to Blofeld would have wanted it that way, wouldn't he? Because he's bringing Bond back to his roots, and that's where Bond's going to die, so to speak, in Blofeld's eyes. So I think it was definitely the right place, and the look was good. It was interesting. You got all the massive derelict thing. I tell you what might have been cool, although I suppose if it had been like that, no, that wouldn't have worked. But no, I did like the whole idea. I had no problem with the
You can't just say that. Well, what were you thinking?
What? No, I was just thinking like little bits of like the occasional bit of rubble that fell, just to add to the danger, because it's still unstable and you didn't know if anything was going to fall. But then if it had been 3 months or something, obviously the majority of stuff would have already been taken care of. So that's a crap idea. So forget that. But no, I thought it was cool. So after the sort of memorial wall, there's that arrow on the wall, isn't there?
Right.
So the guy, James Bond is obviously being graffitied, and that arrow's like, right, Bond, follow this arrow type thing. So he's obviously telling Bond where to go, which was quite interesting, because where is that leading Bond? Because Madeline's like way up top, isn't she? So where are those arrows leading Bond to? Where do you think those arrows are leading Bond to? Madeline, or to deeper into the heart of the building? Or
that leads into where Blofeld's waiting, isn't it? He's got the little countdown timer and the big bulletproof screen. That's
still on the ground floor, isn't it?
Yeah. As far as I would understand it.
Yeah. So that's it. So that's a great bit, isn't it? What did you think about that? I loved. He rocked up. He's got his gun. Because just prior to that, sorry, we skipped ahead there. Prior to that, he's obviously he's walking through, and you get the targets that come down with Bond's face on it, and it's very similar to the pre-title title sequence, of Skyfall.
Yeah.
And I think does Casino Royale have something similar? I don't know, but definitely Skyfall. It's got the same sort of thing, hasn't it? And quite a few people have mentioned it's very sort of similar feel to Golden Gun with the Funhouse. When Bond's tracking around and these things pop up and he's taking pot shots, and that's quite cool, and I really like that. And again, it's like Blofeld almost making Bond shoot himself in a sort of way, which is quite cool. So what did you think about that? And then the next bit.
So obviously he's walking through. You got Bond himself on the sort of in the shooting range kind of bit. That's obviously where Bond would practice, in the basement where he used to practice. Skyfall, and then as he's going through, there's all those printouts of like Le Chiffre and Vesper on the wall and stuff, and Silver and Mr. White, and
where is Dominic Green?
No Dominic Green again. He gets a pass again. But in actual fact, JBR listener John Williams reckons that Dominic Green is actually in the title sequence, very faintly on the left-hand side. But he told me that after I'd seen it the last time, so I haven't been able to look out for it this time. So
next time we go,
that's a call out to the JBR family. If you keep your eye on the left-hand side of the screen, apparently Dominic Green is in that title sequence, very faint on the left-hand side. So keep your eyes out for that. Anyway, all those printouts, And then, yeah, so I suppose it's just sort of taunting him at every step of the way as he's walking through. And then,
so were they shower cubicles? What do you think they were?
I don't really know.
Or were they?
It's hard to sort of tell, I guess, but without sort of looking at the film again. But yeah, so I guess Blofeld had some photos handy of his former operatives and thought he'd print them out, stick them on the wall.
Yeah.
And then I tell you what I do like, actually, is the bit where obviously he comes face to face with Blofeld and then he shoots him, well, tries to shoot him, and then obviously the bulletproof glass is in the way.
Yeah.
And I like the way when they first face off and Bond kind of walks up and Blofeld sort of slowly turns and half of his face is still in shadow. And Bond goes, "You're a hard man to kill, Blofeld." And I just love the way he says that, man. That's like, I can hear Connery saying that.
Yeah.
And I feel like that's just, this is delivery of that line, and what's happening there, the two of them facing off against each other through the bulletproof glass, I think is a really nice touch.
Yeah.
And then obviously we get the reveal of Blofeld's new appearance. What do you think about that, Chris?
Well, I love this whole scene, actually. I think this is great. When he first sees him, he shoots him, and I'm pretty sure, it's not a single shot, it's like 3 shots, I think.
Yeah.
And to me, it still looks quite octopus-like, maybe not exactly like the logo, but it's got something to it. But it's that's kind of like a nod to The World Is Not Enough, isn't it? When Renard's behind the bulletproof glass and Brosnan's Bond sort of shoots him. So I think that's quite nice. But I like that bit where he goes up and he now, do you think, now this is an interesting point, do you think he should have said, "You're a hard man to kill, Franz"? Because
it's a good point. Yeah, I think. Yeah, I don't know. In the sense that would be the name he'd naturally want to call him.
Yeah.
But then, Franz Oberhauser supposedly died a long time ago, so he'd been going by Blofeld for decades by this point. So,
but for Bond's point of view, for Bond saying that line.
Maybe, do you know what? Maybe they should have saved the Blofeld name reveal until that moment. Instead of doing it in the torture room, he'd have been like, "You're a hard man to kill, Franz." And then as he comes out with the scar, he's like, "Franz died. Back on that avalanche. You are now looking at Stavro Blofeld." Maybe that would have been a bigger payoff. Yeah.
Wow, that's great. I'm liking that. No, let's just think, because it is so underplayed in the torture scene, isn't it?
Yeah.
But there's so much else going on within the torture scene. Like, you've got the cat, you've got the actual torture itself. That maybe that line didn't need to happen there. You're right. Yeah. Imagine if I'm just trying to work out if it would have been better or not, and I think it might have been,
because then you'd have the added impact of the scar as well.
Yeah, yeah. I think you're onto something there. Actually, I think that might have been better, and then obviously, that's a good payoff. Yeah. And he would have said Franz. And I think that logically, that would have probably made more sense, I think.
But that's true. But then again, Sam Mendes did say having it as a throwaway line was very intentional, because that name means nothing to Bond in the world at that point. So why have it as this big moment? But I think for us as the audience, maybe doing it like that would have had more of a like, fuck moment than what it was.
He still could have said it in an underplayed tone, but just the situation is what makes it.
Yeah.
So like, if he had walked up to the glass and the reveal comes out, "My name is Ernst Stavro Blofeld," just underplay it the same. But the impact of seeing that face, that's where the impact is. It's seeing the scar while he's saying it, even if he's saying that thing. But anyway, by the by, it still doesn't detract from it. I still think it's a great scene and stuff.
It's a great little moment.
Yeah. So
while all that's going on, of course, we have a cool little scene with M and Q and C over at the CNS building, which has to be the best line in the whole film,
without a doubt. Yeah, definitely.
B, the biggest laugh in the whole film for sure.
Yeah, you should have said C, the best line in the film.
I should have, shouldn't I? Damn it. And C. An interesting throwback as well. So there's a fair bit to talk about. So obviously C ends up in his office. He's locked out, can't log into his thing. M and Q are there. M's sort of bathed in darkness. And they have that sort of exchange of, I'm going to take you in, blah, blah, blah. And then obviously he gets up with the gun. I suppose that we know what M stands for, moron. And then we get the amazing line of, well, we know what C stands for, careless. And then he's got his bullets in his hand, kind of thing, which is exactly the same as the pre-titles of Casino Royale, isn't it? So, what do you think was going on there? That's an interesting one to kind of do, isn't it? So soon after that film.
Yeah, well, I know we sort of mentioned this briefly before, but I think it's an obvious nod. But I think what we kind of thought about last time was it was their way of showing that M, was an SAS man. He had the similar skill set as Bond, and basically back in the day he would have been very similar to Bond, I guess.
Yeah.
And that's kind of shares their link. And perhaps, I guess Bond hasn't been with this M long enough for M to taught him everything he knows, because there's not that sort of relationship. But I guess it just mirrors the background, perhaps, where they come from.
Yeah.
But I think it's a good scene. Now, I've heard people sort of say, "Oh, but that building, there's no one in it." But we only ever see C coming off at his office, and no one else is going to be populating his office, is there? There might have been a definite sort of argument that perhaps we should have seen the scene lower down in the building, maybe the bottom floor, the lobby of this building. They've got all the people in it, all those sort of, people from different countries. There's a bit of a party, a bit of a, like Tomorrow Never Dies with Carver's celebratory party, something along those lines. And then we see C disappear. He takes a phone call and he disappears, and then we cut to him.
Yeah.
In the office with them. I think maybe that might have been a bit better. I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, to be honest with you, I feel like, but at the same time, I'm like, really, that doesn't serve any real function at the end of the day. So I'm really not bothered about those things about where does he get the plane from, how come he's got his goggles on so quick, and all that kind of stuff, because seeing that is, what does it serve? Nothing. It just it
adds to the running time.
Yeah, exactly. Do you know what I mean? It's already long enough at the end of the day. Yeah. 2 hours and 40 minutes, is it? Is that the running time?
I think so, something like that, or 2:45 or 2:40, something like that.
And so I'm not particularly bothered by that, really. But I do love that scene. I love that scene, that line from M. I think that's brilliant. I feel like the writers had that from very early on, and were like, that's going to be a big moment in the script.
Yeah. Imagine, right, if you're a writer, obviously you're coming up with different scenes, whatever, but there's a moment where you suddenly get something and you're like, man, this is going to be brilliant. And how cool is that? Just to come up. Obviously it's an amazing thing to do everything, but there'll be little moments within the creativity where you're onto something, and you'll tell your writing buddy or whatever, or your script reader, and they'll go double thumbs up, and it must be an amazing feeling just to know that 5 million people around the world are going to see this. 5 billion people are going to see this line or hear this line, and it's going to work.
Yeah, absolutely. Cool. But that is a banger, that's for sure. And then obviously we see, I do like that line about him saying, he says, but my quartermaster can, or whatever it is, and he's very talented, or whatever the line is, I don't know, I can't remember. But I do like seeing how brilliant Q is at his job. Do you know what I mean? And how his skills are obviously like total next level to the normal sort of computer hacker type person. He's like a whole different ball game, which is nice. So anyway, then cut back to the MI6 previous headquarters, and then Blofeld says he's got two choices. He can either get out within 3 minutes, or he can save Madeline. So there's that's the moment at the end of like, oh my goodness me. Obviously Blofeld does a runner, and then Bond basically combs the whole building, has a good old sprint around trying to find her, and then so what, like when you get to that kind of point where obviously Blofeld's got in his chopper, he's kind of just hovering, just waiting for the building to explode, and he's going to watch. Bond gets up into what would have been the room where it all exploded in Skyfall, and there's the whole gap in the wall,
which is M's office.
M's office, and then he's and then just sort of like he's eyeballing the helicopter across. How do you feel about that little kind of standoff moment?
Yeah, I'm still not sure, in all honesty. Like, I like the bit where before Blofeld leaves, I'm sure he says something like, "That's the thing about brothers, James. We know how to push each other's buttons," or something like that, isn't he? Doesn't he say something? I'm sure he refers to his brothers and says the line about the buttons, and then push it. The same 3 minutes that Trevelyan gave Bond as well. I like that little nod. And then obviously he buggers off, gets in the helicopter. Now the whole bit, like when I was watching it, I was thinking, okay, like this building is massive. It is ginormous. You know, he's got 3 minutes to find Madeline, and she could be anywhere.
Yeah.
And the only way that he sort of finds it is he happens to come across the right floor.
Yeah.
Obviously, I guess Blofeld is helping him in a way by shining the light onto M's floor. Maybe he's telling him. Maybe he still doesn't think he's going to get there in time, but he'll give him a helping hand just to get to that floor. Perhaps that's part of it. I don't know. But it is quite a tricky one. I wouldn't like to, if that was a game show and it was like, right, you got to find the trapped person in 3 minutes or, you know, that's it.
Yeah.
I wouldn't like to be a contestant because I don't think I'll be able to do it.
Yeah.
Because it is tricky. But then it's Bond, isn't it? And that, it's. I'm still not sure, to be honest. I'm really still not sure about that.
I mean, the whole thing we said is, you know, when he opens the door and finds her, and it is that sort of 60s Batman thing, especially the way she's tied up with all the ropes kind of dangling down.
And they're red as well, aren't they? All sort of
it is very 60s Batman. And again, it's one of those situations where, you know, this is a fantastical situation. You probably wouldn't have got this scene in Casino. Do you know what I mean? For example, that's a lot more of a grounded movie than this one. But the setting of it, M's previous office, M's now dead, it is quite a poignant thing. So I suppose if you're thinking about it, the kind of sort of cat and mouse game that Blofeld likes to play, I imagine a natural instinct would be like, M's office is the place to go. Do you know what I mean? Because what a poignant place for him to meet his death if the building blew up, you know?
What about this? Okay, so what if in the standoff with Blofeld, he sort of before he leaves, he's like, you know, if you're ever trying to find out something, always look up, James. Always look to the skies or something like that. Okay, so Blofeld buggers off. Bond then gets to the center point of the whole building. Say the net's not there, or it's a different part where there isn't a net, and he looks up, and there's like a sheet of glass, cracked glass. And lying on this glass is Madeline Swan. Right. Okay. But Blofeld he sees Blofeld shoot the glass, which shatters, and Madeline drops, and she's got like a rope around her neck, not enough to hang, you know, break her neck or whatever, but basically she's hanging. So Bond, that's the time is Bond has to save her, and he sees her, so he knows where she is. He can see she's in danger. She's hanging by this rope by her neck or by her body or whatever in this massive gap. You know, how the hell is he going to get her down? You know, she's going to die if he leaves her. And but having that visual, do you think A, that would have been more powerful, or B, perhaps Bond, it would have been more realistic in the fact that Bond seeing what his challenge is rather than just almost happenstance coming across it. What do you think?
That definitely would have made that a little more grounded, I suppose, rather than having him guess in the entire building. Having at least some sort of giving him some sort of clue that would, you know,
even if Blofeld alluded to M's office in a line when he left, that's all he needed, because the amount of time it would still take to get there would be like, you know, obviously really close to 3 minutes. So I think maybe he should have said something like, you know, the answer's always where your mother is, or, you know, something along those lines, just to give that hint to Bond, and then that's what Bond does. I think that would have been better. Just to
you're absolutely right. Yeah,
just to give that scene a bit more. Sort of
at the end of the day, that especially with how she's tied up, that is very 60s Batman. That sequence, and then obviously, so they're eyeballing each other. He grabs her. Do you trust me? Jumps down into the thing. Now,
which I quite like.
What surprises me about this is we have a blatant CGI jump there. Yeah. So he jumps off the side, lands in the net. And out they go.
Stuntmen.
Now, one of the worst things in the whole series is Jinx's little jump into the sea in Die Another Day. Looks fucking awful.
I hate it.
This is a similar kind of thing, let's face it. It's a similar sort of thing. Yeah, it doesn't bug me. And I don't know why. I can't answer you why it doesn't bug me.
No.
It definitely looks better than Jinx's jump, for sure.
No, easily. Well, it's at night as well. I think the dark helps.
Yeah, but it's still essentially the same thing. So I don't know why it doesn't bug me. And then obviously they're down there, jump down to kind of underneath, get in the boat, and off they go.
What about if they had used a stuntman and stuntwoman to do an actual jump.
Well,
Not for the close-ups, but for an actual drop.
That is, I'm always in favour of that. Like, let's just not have the CGI and let's just do it for real wherever possible. I think.
Yeah.
I mean, the one thing I think could be perhaps a touch too much in that pre-title sequence is when the building falls down onto the other building and then that building falls apart, and it's very video gamey, isn't it?
Yeah.
But then obviously there's the payoff with the sofa that he lands on, which I do enjoy.
Very, very good.
But I don't know. It's a funny one, that. But yeah, the CGI doesn't bother me anywhere near as much as it did in Skyfall. Like the whole Silver's Island thing was almost like it was so much of it looked like it was green screen. It was just like, and there is a bit of that in Blofeld's crater base this time as well, but it just doesn't bother me. It doesn't bother me this time, whereas before it used to wind me up a lot with Skyfall. But so that's that kind of thing. Obviously, across the river, we've got M's leading C off. They have a little scuffle. A couple of shots go off, and he falls off the kind of walkway, I suppose you'd call it, to his doom. We don't get a CGI drop with that, which is nice.
Which I'm really happy about. Really happy about
that. There he is, dead, lying on the CNS kind of sign on the ground, which is a bit of poignant way for him to go. And then we have it. So what do you think about that jump then? Like, as they're escaping from MI6 across the river, what do you think about that?
Into the net, into the safety net. I think they should have done a stunt couple, at least filmed a stunt couple to see what it looked like, because you can, high falls are part of, professional stunt people's resume, isn't it? And it would have looked awesome. Even if they tried it just to see if it worked, and why not? And I think it but in a way, that's improving on something that's not too bad, rather than improving on something which I absolutely hate, because I don't mind it. It's there and it's fine.
Yeah.
Okay, tweak it a bit, and it might have been better, but it still doesn't. It's still not bad.
Yeah. That's the thing.
Like you said,
a lot of people say the whole movie is ruined by the final act, basically the third act of the film. I don't feel like that at all, not even remotely. And I feel like that's a shame, because if you look at it like that, you're essentially missing out on some absolute top drawer Bond stuff in this movie. Yeah. But I think it's a funny one, that kind of I can see where people are coming from in this sequence, but I enjoy the fact that it's in the MI6 kind of wreckage. Yeah. Like I say, you could have done it. You could have probably played it better and made it a bit less Batman-y. Had Bond at least had a clue of where to find her, rather than just left to his own devices, and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, I think it's one of those, like you say, you summed it up perfectly there. It's like you could have tweaked this and that to make it better and sort of flow a bit more and made it a bit more believable. But in no way does it ruin anything for me. I'm just like, it'd probably been better if they did that. But I don't, no biggie as far as I'm concerned.
What do you think about Blofeld's line then? We get like his version of the classic "Goodbye, Mr. Bond."
Goodbye, Mr. Bond. Yeah,
but his isn't quite to that extent. But it's still. I think it's still. Are you happy that he said that? Goodbye, James Bond.
Yeah, I mean, I think he does it in a sort of very sort of off the cuff way, doesn't he? Goodbye, James Bond, and then off he goes. Which I think a lot of people are saying that he's really underused in this film. Yeah. But when you compare him to the screen time that, say, Donald got, for example,
he's got more than Donald.
I mean, Donald didn't have much at all, which I guess maybe goes to credit Donald even more because of what he did with the time he had. But yeah, that's an interesting kind of way to look at that. But yeah, I think what I'm really looking forward to, I think essentially what this film is like Blofeld Begins, basically. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. And it is definitely a setup for the next one. And I think we're going to see a lot more of him next time round. And you had to do that reveal of like the man in the shadows pulling the strings behind sort of closed doors. You had to sort of do that. So naturally that lends to less screen time in a sense. But I think next time we're going to see a lot more of him, and I think that'll please people more, I think.
If it was a film where he had died, which would have been absolutely stupid,
Yeah.
then you would have gone, well, hang on a minute, we should have seen more. But everyone knew, he's obviously going to continue. And if you'd seen him like twice, 3 times as much as we saw him, you'd dilute then the next film, wouldn't you?
Yeah.
So 100% they did it right in terms of the amount of time we see Blofeld.
Yeah. I think the scenes we see him in are amazing. Like the Spectre meeting is a banger. The whole sort of
the meteorite room and all that
is a banger. You've got that torture scene, which is great. Brilliant. That whole sort of Colonel Sun thing that's going on there and all that stuff, and all the little nods and all that kind of business is all great. I think. Yeah, I mean, I'm in agreement with people. I think the last third is the weakest part of the film for sure. Yeah. And we're going to talk about the actual climax of the film, the next bit next time. But we've got some thoughts on that as well. But yeah, I think it's an absolutely solid sort of introduction to Blofeld. You've got some backstory in there, which is nice, and all that kind of stuff. Now, the one thing I thought is maybe, do you think it was a little bit much to give him the scar straight away? You could have saved that for the next film. Do you think that was a bit sort of too much all at once or not?
What about if it happened in the helicopter when he came out of the helicopter and it was that impact? Imagine the helicopter crashing, him smashing his face off the inside of the helicopter, and then as he crawled out, we don't see him. He's just crawling along the bridge until he sees Bond's feet next to him, and then he looks up, and then we first see the scar. Do you think that would have been better because that would have been right at the end?
Maybe. I mean, at the end of the day, it's Madeline that gives him the scar.
Yeah.
So not Bond. So that's an interesting one, and I think that might be a story point they play into next time. I don't know. So that might be a little something. Obviously, we're not going to elaborate on that too much until we do our Bond 25 speculation episode that's coming up soon. But yeah, I feel like, to be honest, I can take or leave that. I feel like either or. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But yeah, I can see how some people would say there's all this backstory with them as kids now, and now Bond's given him the scar as well. That might be sort of a bit too much all at once or not. But I don't mind it. I think it's at the end of the day, Chris, when I saw him turn around with that scar, I had a real serious moment in my under trousers, and I loved it. He's got that scar, and it was amazing. And there it is.
And like you said, it's different because that's the first time we see the scar, but next time we get to see it like kind of not healed over, but it'll be almost like tight around his eye and just the aftermath of the bruise and the cut and stuff. So that's something else to look forward to because it'll be that little bit different.
The argument is as well, you could have made him lose his hair in this film as well, and that would have probably been a bit much, wouldn't it? Would have
maybe
been
they're doing it they're doing it bit by bit, perhaps. Yeah. Perhaps he loses hair in the next one.
Maybe Hink's got all his teeth knocked out in that train fall. He's going to come back next time and have some maybe silver dentures put in or something. I don't know. But funny point, actually, somebody pointed out, whose name I forgot, I'm sorry, but one of the JBR listeners pointed out that Mr. Hinks' name is never used in the film. So he's another one like Strawberry Fields, which is an interesting one,
Which means he's going to 100% come back in the next film, and Blofeld's going to use his name 100%. 100 million %.
Yeah, right, cool.
Definitely. Okay, so what do you think about MI6 in terms of Vauxhall Cross building, demolished? Do you think they'll ever go, oh, it's been rebuilt again, and then show it? Or do you think they're never going to try and have it in Craig's Bond ever again? Or do you think they tried to do that, and then in one of the shots we actually see it in the London landscape, and we go, oh, look, there it is, and we're like, oh shit, it shouldn't have been there.
Well, I did go past it on the train home after we had our Ultimate Bond week, and I had a look to see if it was still there, and it is. It's actually, they didn't actually blow it up.
What?
It is actually...
That's ruined the film for me, man.
It's still there. There's not even anything... There wasn't even any explosions in there. I felt robbed.
That's just bollocks, man.
I feel like where we're going with that is next time we're going to see the return of Universal Exports. It's going to be some nondescript door. It's not going to be this big government building. And I think the story of this one, with all the surveillance and the moles, leads up to that perfectly. We can't have this big building in plain view of the public everybody knows what it is. We have to be in the shadows more. And I feel like next time, if we see him walking up and there's a little silver plaque on the door that's like Universal Exports Limited, and he walks through that door, I will have another under trouser explosion. Yeah.
Man, you must get through so many.
Yeah, I do when it comes to Bond, man. I really do.
Yeah, it's good. But I mean, that would be immense. Yeah, I agree. It's going to have to be something a lot more discreet. Maybe the underground. So do you think Q will have his equivalent of the underground lab that we saw in this one in future Bond? I suppose we're getting into speculation here, so perhaps we shouldn't really go on about that.
Yeah, I think ultimately we'll probably have like a classic Q lab scene next time.
Yeah.
But yeah, we are falling off topic a little bit there, I suppose.
So we are.
So I guess that about rounds out today's discussion, doesn't it?
It does, yeah. So thwarting Blofeld's plan. So basically, Blofeld's plan. Plan and music death for Bond. Heard that one before. Yeah. Didn't quite happen the first time.
No.
Okay, shit, he's still alive. I know what we'll do. We'll kidnap Madeline. We'll get Bond to try and save her, and we'll kill him again. Yes, excellent. Yeah. And according to Blofeld, at this point in time, he thinks job done.
Yeah, absolutely. So we will return tomorrow to discuss the ending of the film. Now, I feel like aside from the brother link kind of thing, the Oberhauser brother link, I think this section is what is probably secondary to that in terms of what's pissed most people off. So, and there are some definite problems I have with this ending, and we will discuss that all tomorrow. So much excitement to be had in the morning with that. So, definitely. Until then, I've been Tom Sears.
I've been Chris Wright.
And James Bond Radio will return tomorrow morning. We'll see you then.
We will indeed. Ciao, everyone.
Bye.